Grow Great is a city government leadership podcast with Lisa Norris and me, Randy Cantrell. Each week we share insights, experiences, and wisdom to help you and your leadership grow great. Our website is growgreat.com. There's that famous quote by Abraham Lincoln, "I will prepare and someday my chance will come." But let me spin the context of that just ever so slightly. The preparation that we need to put in to have the courage to stand alone if we have to stand alone. My son and I were having a conversation the other day, and the subject was leadership, and he will be 44 later this summer, to give you some context for the age gap between the two of us. I'm 67, he'll be 44. And we were talking about this notion of a wingman. You know, if you enter the fray of leadership and you're prepared to stand alone, I told him, I have found that more often than not, you think you're standing alone, you probably aren't, but the courage to be the first one to step forward. Picture this metaphorical line of people, and you're all literally towing the line. But somebody's got to make the first move. Somebody has to step forward. Somebody's got to be a leader and step out. And I have found from experience that it's rare for people to have that courage for a variety of reasons. But if you prepare and you step forward and you're prepared to stand alone, you're prepared to step out there and nobody to join you, I have found more often than not, those people that are staring down at their shoes, when they see somebody else, it gives them courage. It gives them courage they might not otherwise have to join. And so as Lisa and I were talking about this, obviously before we hit record, I was thinking about my own leadership journey and those times where I was prepared to stand alone. And sometimes you do, and you have to, but more often than not for me, when I stepped out, I could look up and down that line and see somebody else had stepped out with me. Mm-hmm. And many, many times it was not who I thought it would be, which is interesting.
The truth.
I mean, many, many times it's that person that, well, I didn't see that coming. And that person that you kind of counted on and you thought, yeah, they'll, no, they stay back. And I'm not judging anybody. It's just an interesting study in psychology for me. So I don't know, when we talk about standing alone or having the courage to stand alone, whether that is the ultimate outcome or not, how do you go about preparing yourself?
I think the first question that I always ask myself is what is the right thing to do? That becomes the ultimate test, and right has a lot of different answers. Right can be difficult. Right can be easy. Right might be hurt. It's going to hurt someone, not with intent or harm, but it's going to be hurtful to them. But what is the right thing to do? And that's always been my foundation.
Is it going to be hurtful or is it going to be disappointing?
I'd say probably disappointing is a better word.
Okay.
Yeah, disappointing is a better word. Because you're never there to instill harm on somebody to affect their life. It's usually, when you have to do corrective
What are you thinking,
action,
like terminating? Okay.
Separate, there's those things that are difficult. Any kind of corrective action seems to be, which, it's not hard for me. It seems to be very difficult for many leaders, is correcting because of the fear of the outcome. Are they going to lose that person? Are they going to turn them where they're now sour and not productive? And to me, the right thing is to correct. And it doesn't always mean discipline. You can correct and coach or mentor. You and I have talked a lot about this. Just telling them, hey, how do you think that went? What could have been done differently or better? And then let them talk about it, and then you mentor them. It doesn't always have to be a piece of paper that somebody signs. You eventually may have to get to that. But I think so many people move immediately to corrective when you're talking about any kind of action to move them to high performance, or hopefully your goal is to move them to high performance. For me, as you know, when we talk about this, it's kind of like the eagle that soars alone. You sometimes are on an island, and you have to be, but make sure it's intentional, and what you're doing is for our true definition of focus on others. Are you doing what is in the best interest of your team, the city, etc.? And you just sometimes need to do that, but be thoughtful about the method, be thoughtful about how you go about doing it, and who needs to be involved. And then you just have to move. You have to take that step, because there are many people I've found in my career that don't have the courage to take the first step. They will follow, but they just don't have the courage. That doesn't mean they're weak either. They just, for whatever reason, don't want to be the first one to go. That's what a leader does. Once you establish yourself as a true leader and a great leader, we've always talked about this, that people will follow you into the war, and they will risk themselves for you and for the team, because they feel like you've got them. You would not be taking them there if there wasn't a need. And I feel like that's so often the case. We just have to have the courage to take the first step, but make sure it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, agreed. I had an old mentor. In fact, it happened to be the preacher that married Rhonda and I. And he was the father of my best friend. And he said, people choose who they're going to follow. You can't dictate that. You can't ordain that. You can't, okay, here's your leader. Follow him. I mean, you can try, I have found that's true, whether it's personal or professional context. We all decide, for whatever our reasons, they're worth following. That comes to my mind in that I would challenge all of us, be worth following, which I think plays into what you said about doing the right thing, which means morally, ethically, legally, put it in any context you want, to do the right thing. I think for some of us, the hard thing is doing the right thing. Yes, it fits all of those, but now it's the wisdom piece. It's based on what I know, based on my experience, based on my expertise, whatever that may be. I absolutely positively believe this is the best course of action, and you may be the only one who believes that. You may be the only one who even knows that. I've had countless coaching sessions through the years of challenging people who had some kind of an intel about an organization. It could be finance, it could be marketing, it could be manufacturing, it could be anything. But they had some specific area of knowledge, and only they knew it. And it would sound something like this. Here's the situation. Here's what I know to be true. Do the bosses know? Do the higher-ups know? No. Well, why don't they know? Well, they don't ask. Well, okay, so now what's your responsibility to step out and to inform them? And now all of a sudden, that's where the fear kicks in. It's like, well, I don't want to be that guy. And I always use the metaphor of the canary in the coal mine. Mm-hmm. Old days took canaries down literally into the coal mine, and if the canaries died, then they knew, okay, well, the oxygen's depleted here. If the canary dies, we all better scram. We better get out. Or if there's gas or something that kills the canary in the coal mine is the barometer. And sometimes we have to be that canary. We have to be the one that leads the way to show them this is trouble. This is trouble. We need to tap the brakes here. Those are really, really hard things. What have you found?
What I've found is interesting over the years. It depends. It always depends on the circumstance, but it always obviously comes down to courage. And I've seen it both ways, where maybe it's citywide and I need to say something like to the city manager or to my leadership team above me, whoever that is at the time. This is over my whole career, whether it was private or public sector. Secondly, I'm always impressed when you see your team members that have courage, that they come forward with something that's very difficult. And typically, this is when they have to, they have issues with their leader, with their manager. That's when I've seen courage and I've experienced it, where they don't want to come forward, but they feel like to meet what the expectations are and the culture that I was trying to create, there are things I may not be aware of. And like you said, I think it was so interesting because it is often the people that are sometimes the quietest that you'd least expect, but they took the lead, and then you all of a sudden see something. I mean, you know that they're good. As far as a performer, they're great, but they took the step for the team and what's in the best interest of the team to bring it forward. And in those moments, I also find the ones that have done that for me have brought forward information. They didn't just come with words. They said, here are examples so that you understand what we're talking about. That is where I love that courage and that ability for the team to help me make those decisions where I need to move on something or I need to do something as a leadership team. And then from a leadership standpoint, I remember when I had to go to Tom hard on something. I honestly don't remember the topic, but it was really bothersome. And we were doing something that I definitely didn't agree was in the best interest of the city. And maybe they hadn't thought about it. And I went over to Tom and asked him if he had some time. And I said, hey, I know everybody else. I mean, the entire leadership team was like, we need to go do this. And I was like, Tom, I need you to listen and if you decide to move after this, that's fine. But I just want to make sure you know about this piece. And he sat and listened and he said, okay, I hear you. I still think we need to move forward on whatever it was. And this was probably 15 years ago. And in fact, it's longer than that because I was still a manager at the time. So my director was out. And I could not sleep that night. I was like, maybe I didn't communicate it. Maybe he just simply disagrees, but it's bothering me so much. I need one more opportunity. And I kind of laid it out with bullet points. And I said, hey, I know you made your decision. I'm not trying to trump you and I'm not trying to be defensive. May I just come over one more time? He said, I'm coming to you. And he walked up, he never came over and sat down. He came over and sat down on my couch and he said, I just want to make sure you have my full attention because you've never asked for this before. And if it's bothering you so much you can't sleep, I want to hear what it is. And so I laid it out to him and I said, I just don't know if I communicated it well, but I've got bullets. And I kind of went through it. And I said, I really think this could be devastating. If this goes awry, it's really going to damage blah, 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 blah. And he said, I definitely did not hear that yesterday. And that does change my mind. Let me get back with the leadership team. I think we're going to go in a different direction. And he changed his mind. And he didn't never say I said anything. He just told the team, but afterwards he was like, thank you for having the courage to bring that forward twice. I know that must've been hard for you being several layers beneath the top, right? Because that's 4 layers deep that I am between me and him. And of course, when my boss got back, I told him, I said, hey, I took this leap of faith and I just went and told Tom direct because I don't know what he's getting fed. You were out. And I just think he needed to hear it. There was a time crunch issue.
Sure.
So anyway, those things that worked, obviously that worked well in that case. It doesn't always go that way. But courage, sometimes if you do it well and right, and as we always talk about being intentional, I think that helps. But you also have to recognize sometimes the outcome is still a no. It doesn't mean that every time it's going to be this glorious story. Sometimes you had the courage to bring it forward. It didn't go as planned, but at least I know I could sleep at night having said it.
What role does credibility play in that? I mean, we've used the C word of courage, but I'll add that word, credibility, because you and I both know there are people, the sky is falling.
Yes.
And okay, it's
crying
just,
wolf.
Here they go again.
Credibility is key. Do you not agree? You have
Oh,
to
yeah.
trust the individual coming forward. And
Yeah, but I mean,
knowing,
you could be courageous to go and just to lay something out because it's your opinion. But we have to put in the work, it seems to me, to be credible.
yes, agree.
Had you not had that, Tom probably hadn't given you that second meeting.
No,
May not have given you the first one, but he
That's
sure
right.
wouldn't have given you the second one. And so I don't know. That's worth a little bit of focus because I think that I don't know that that precedes courage. I think you have to have the courage to be credible. I think you have to have the courage to put in the work and be patient and put in the time and the effort and the performance to be credible.
you have to prove it through actions over a period of time. It is not. It's like trust. Trust is earned, not given.
That's right.
I mean, you have to earn it.
That's
you have
right.
to earn your credibility over time. That you are thoughtful in your decisions. You are thoughtful in your actions.
So
and that
what's
you
your
assess
what's
impact.
your wisdom for current leaders or aspiring leaders, you know, who want to be courageous to build their credibility? Because there are those among us who we want to be that canary in the coal mine. We want that responsibility. Not everybody does, and I'm not judging them any more than you are. But talk to us about any philosophies or ideas you've got about the courage to work on that credibility piece.
Credibility, in my mind, it first starts with your honor and your integrity, knowing that you're going to do what's right when nobody's watching and for the right reasons. It is demonstrated through your actions over time. What your words must match your actions. If there is if it's incongruent and they don't match, people see through that very quickly and they realize what you're just preaching, but you're not following, you're not walking what you talk. So that is most important is honor and integrity. Secondly, actions need to match your words over the course of time. So that's consistency becomes key in your messaging and what you're doing. And then lastly, it has to prove, in my mind, to the benefit of others. It is not self-focused, it's outward focused on what would benefit the team and the city. And you've always got that at the forefront in your approach. You do those things well, that gains credibility over time because they have seen that you have their best interest at heart. Now, can that turn for people? It can turn for a lot of reasons. You don't know why. I think you've experienced it. I've experienced it over time. What you believe you have established, all of a sudden something goes awry and it's not as expected. And that can be very disappointing. But long term, I've always found there is a core that will be faithful and they will follow you forever. They may get quiet about it if there's challenges, but they will follow you because you have proven consistency and you have proven a message and a heart that is compassionate. Just like we've talked about, Randy, our leadership recipe. You have acted with humility. You seek curiosity and you trust your people. All of those things over time create credibility, and credibility can also be dashed quickly if you veer off from any of those. The years it took you, people always remember the things you did wrong, but you hope that over time and that the trust that you've earned, credibility that you've earned through that trust and through your work and through your high performance, all of those should shine bright.
And I can hear people say, yeah, well, that's great and wonderful, guys, but I don't work for a boss who's got any kind of an open door policy. I don't work for a boss. I work for a boss. You and I hear this all the time. I work for a boss who, man, every idea, especially the good idea, they've got to be her idea. If they're not her idea, forget it. Ain't going to happen. So real easy to be courageous when you've got, say, a Tom Hart. But I'm not working for Tom. I'm working for somebody that's leans a bit more on the side of tyranny. And you would say what?
You can still be courageous and still lead your team well. You are in charge of your team. You can You can take a lot of actions that establish credibility with your team. And then you have to, again, be intentional with what you believe you can do and what you believe you cannot do. And you just have to control what you can, control what's within your authority to do, and establish that at that level. Because you can still, there is always in my, we've talked about this, Randy, there are always opportunities. I look at everything. You either learn how to deal with very difficult people, you learn how to work with an autocratic boss, you learn how to lead through adversity. There are lots of things that can still benefit you and your team, but don't give in to that, and don't give up when you face those things above you. You just have to learn to manage what you can and what you can control. When I've talked to people about this, probably half of my team's heard me say it. What are you in control of when they come frustrated? And I said, you're in control of you. That's the one thing that you have control of. So don't look at everything you're not in control of and get frustrated. Control what you can impact. That's where we need to keep our focus and our minds set. That's what we can control. We can't control decisions at the top. We can share information. We can provide what we believe would be helpful. How they choose it, if they don't want to hear it, or if they don't want your ideas, that's up to them. That's in their arena. But I know I can control what's equal to me and down at this point. In other words, I can go out and down and still have great influence and still make an impact. We've all been in that. I've had a terrible boss in my 30 something years now in leadership. Terrible boss. But honestly, I learned a lot from that boss of what I didn't want to be, and that shaped my leadership journey. It's all in perspective and how you look at it.
Yeah, well, I've gone on record. I mean, the first decade, my first decade was, I learned everything by how not to do it. I mean, it really set the trajectory for me.
It's all about perspective. You truly have to see where the opportunities are in the darkness, because there's always a light. You just got to find it. You got to keep digging and find that light for things to open up.
You and I use the phrase, figuring it out. And the other phrase that people commonly will hear us say is making a difference. And those are the two things. We're all in this journey trying to figure this out. We don't have it figured out. About the time we do have it figured out, we have more likely figured out what we haven't figured out. And so we realize there's more work to be done. It never ends. No, it's a never ending story. But the other part is what are we trying to figure out? Well, we're trying to figure out a way to make a more impactful difference.
Right.
And so I would encourage any leader or prospective leader, focus on that. Focus on how you can serve people and make a positive difference. And I get the context matters and all of that, where you are in the food chain and the hierarchy, all of that can matter. And we have to learn to navigate whatever our culture is. We would never suggest that you put yourself in harm's way. We would never suggest, that you throw the door open and you say, let me tell you what we need to do. I mean, there's also the delivery mechanism. There's also the tactful, right way to do things. You learned in your story, first shot at telling Tom what you had to tell him. Okay, you didn't pull that off.
Right.
But you went back.
It wasn't done well.
You went back, you regrouped, you figured it out, how that you could better communicate that, and you did, and it was a very different outcome. And to your point, yeah, the result could have easily been the same, but still I would say that was a positive move on your part. Courage builds courage. And our ability to look inward, which we talked about the last show, our ability to be self-aware and to go, I could have done that better, and here's what I could do differently, for us to continue to learn. Before we wind up, talk to me about the courage to maybe not be the first person that steps out, because sometimes those of us who find ourselves at some point in our career with the courage to be the first to step out, maybe it began with the courage to be the very second person. So talk to me about that.
Well, I think it comes down to where you're at in your career and where you are at in your confidence to me, confidence plays a lot in that and in your ability. So often the leaders take the first step. And I say leaders can be informal leaders. You do not have to have the title to do that. But I often see that in teams where I've had teams, just as an example, they huddle up as a group and say, gosh, this is affecting us. Is it affecting you, or am I standing alone? And they kind of dialogue. And then I've almost seen them. So I don't know if it plays to your point, but they kind of, rather than doing it individually, they say, can we talk to you as a team? I've had that happen. So not the courage to be alone and having one designee, which I've seen happen, where they're like, you're going to go tell her, you know her longer, you whatever.
Sure, right.
I have had them, and it's kind of along those lines where it's not the first, it's not the second, it's a group approach. They come, and then I've told them I appreciate that, but I want to talk to them individually to get perspective, and thank you for sharing, so that they have the confidence that they can be frank and honest. But I get a little bit more in-depth understanding from each of them. So I've had that happen. Coming out second, I think, is just building confidence. They are like, okay, they did that. Now I have the confidence to also step out. And I've seen actual in front of me growth in those ways where, let's say it's two individuals in the same role. One of them's really dominant and they're always telling their opinions first. And I've seen where others will kind of follow that and just go, yeah, that's fine. That's good. But then over time, you start seeing this growth of, and I've had to actually have conversations with people going, it's okay to have an opinion, right? I've hired you in your role. If you have a different opinion, don't be afraid to say it. Just say, you know what, that's a good point, but I kind of am thinking along these lines. So don't discount it, just validate and share your perspective. And when you see that happen, it's like this pride factor that goes off in you as a mentor. That's like, they stepped out. I'm seeing them. They weren't the first, but they said, I do agree with that, but I'm kind of thinking, and they're nervous. You can see how it plays out. But those are just as valid moments, especially if you know your people, that you're not only proud of them, you see what you're working to achieve, that you're developing them. And for you and I, Randy, our focus is on others. We want their success. It's not about us, it's about them. And those are real kind of, I call them proud mama moments. You have those moments where you're seeing them develop. And stepping out second's okay, because it's going to lead you to stepping out first at some point.
That's right. Well, confidence is for most of us, confidence, courage, call it whatever you will, it's a developed muscle. There are some people that are just kind of naturally, I don't know if it's brave. I would call it more boldness. They're just naturally bold. They're not going to hesitate about anything, which can be reckless and dangerous, by the way. And then there are those of us, my hands in the air, who can absolutely be smitten with overthinking it. Because I'm a person who's going to play every conceivable scenario that I can think of in my head. How could this work out? Now, that serves me real well doing what I'm doing today. Because if I'm sitting here with you and we're engaged in a coaching session, the very last thing I want to do is put you in harm's way. Mm-hmm. My first focus is, okay, I'm thinking, where are the mind's at? Mm-hmm. This is a minefield that we're all navigating, our career. It feels like a minefield. I'm not trying to over dramatize that, but it is. We could step on something that could absolutely blow our career up. Maybe blow up a job, not a career, but we could. We could do some things. Our boldness could lead us to some reckless behavior. I've seen good people in a moment of frustration, frankly, just exhibit, horrific insubordination. It's not who they are, but the moment got the best of them.
Right.
And so I tend to overthink it, which serves me to serve other people, to kind of keep them out of harm's way. I think it's just,
it happens to all of us. In moments,
I think it happens to most of us. I've seen people who don't who not only don't overthink, they grossly underthink, which is horribly, in my opinion, horribly dangerous to not think about the consequences of stepping out there. And then there's that moment that we haven't talked about that might be worth some conversation today or elsewhere. There's also the timing of it.
Yeah,
You
timing
mentioned
matters.
this scenario with Tom, and okay, there's a time compression issue here. Your boss is out. Here you are, kind of holding the bag, literally, and there's this time element of this decision to be made. Well, that matters. That's part of the context of that story. Had that not been the case,
It might not have been right timing to say
well, and
something.
now you go to Tom once, and now you go to Tom twice, but it's not some sense of urgency. Well, that probably wouldn't have been the wise course of action.
Right. And have you ever, I'm just curious as we talk about this, have you ever seen the confidence to be quiet?
Oh,
To
absolutely.
just not say anything?
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that? Because people are probably like, what do you mean? Because I've seen it too. What do you mean to be quiet? The whole purpose of confidence is stepping out. Well, not always.
I don't. Yeah, and I don't agree with that. And I'll freely admit my bias, because my bias is the way I have discovered I'm wired. I'm a natural introvert. I'm quiet. I look like an extrovert, but I'm not. And put me in a group dynamic, even if I'm at the head of the table, and I want to hear what the room's got to say. I'm real curious to find out, to get some sense of the room. What are these people thinking? What are these people feeling? The last thing I want to do as a leader, and this has always been the case for me from the time I was young till now, I don't want to taint this room. I don't want to throw the poison pill out here and say, well, guys, here's what I think. What do y'all think?
Yeah.
No,
You want to
it's
be
too-
the last to go as
Too
a
late.
leader.
Too
Yeah.
late. Too late. You've already told us how you feel. So any opinions we had that were dissenting, we are not going to. And if they did, they'd be fools.
Right.
So I don't judge them for that. So I want to get some lay of the land. I've been in meetings that involved an awful lot of people, and I'm always fascinated by that person who's the first to pipe up. Well, here's what I think, and that's almost 100% of the time how it starts. Well, I think, fill in the blank. They don't ask questions. They don't do anything. In my opinion, they're morons. These are not leaders. These are just, in most cases, these are bold novices who just want to be heard.
And it's not
Okay.
that they do it once. This is the type, if I'm
Oh, they're
hearing you,
consistent.
that they do it every time. They want to be the first to speak up and give their opinion. So I don't want people to think, well, when you say,
No.
well, here's what I think, that's an incorrect method. It's when you do it every time to be the first to give an opinion.
Well,
Right?
I'm talking about meetings that, okay, you know the players. How many of you go into a meeting and you can already predict how the meeting's going to go? Because so and so always is going to be the first to pipe up and say, well, I think we ought to do X, Y, Z. And usually, if not always, in my experience, that person never asks a question. I would much rather be the guy who lays back and facilitates by asking questions, that's just my natural bent. I'm the guy I'm going to look at that person who maybe hasn't spoken and say, well, Joe, what do you think about all this? Because I want to hear what Joe's got to say. If Joe has sat there quiet and he's listened to all this, Joe's thinking something. I really want to know what Joe's thinking. Doesn't mean I have to agree with it. This is the other thing that's on my mind as we were talking is, as a boss, I just don't understand what we have to lose. I don't understand a boss feeling, besmirched by somebody coming to us with a dissenting opinion or telling us something that maybe we don't know. Because for me, I have learned that my Achilles heel, and every leader's Achilles heel, I believe, anybody leading an organization, is what you don't know. What you don't know will kill you. You can be that grumpy old man who doesn't want to go to the doctor and doesn't want to get a physical because, I know something's not quite
I just
right.
don't want to
but
hear it.
yeah,
I don't want to hear it.
I don't want to know. It's the three monkey thing.
Yeah.
I've never understood. I just don't understand that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I completely admit there are bosses who behave that way. I don't understand it because those are the very things that can destroy your culture and destroy your organization. So I don't understand it. When the worst thing that could happen is somebody comes to you and they say something and you don't agree with it. Okay, well, you're the boss. You can still listen. And you don't have to even say anything to them. You don't have to tell them that you disagree. It's just intel. You just make your decision. And if you make your decision that's congruent with what they gave you, fine. If you don't, fine. But I don't understand why it's a high price to listen and to really understand, which, kudos to Tom. I mean, so it's rare. Come on, let's admit it's rare. It would be rare for a city manager to say, no, I'm coming to you and sit down in your office, and you're 4 levels lower. I admit that's rare. But I will also admit,
Well, it
Tom
was
Hart,
rare, but that's why it was powerful.
Of course.
It was very powerful. I'm like, holy cow. He hasn't come over here, just
he hadn't come here
to,
ever. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And it's not that he wasn't the type to get out. It's just everybody he left his office door open and we'd all just walk in. I mean, he'd welcome you and make you feel like you're the most important thing in the world. It didn't matter what level. It could be the groundskeeper.
That's right.
He was just a genuine, that kind of guy. But on the quiet confidence, I've kind of seen 2 different things happen that are interesting, and that can be positive or destructive. So on the quiet confidence, I'm like you. Those are the ones that have been sitting back and listening. You have to know that, like you said, you need to know the players in the room.
Well, and time out. Are we calling quiet confidence that person they're quiet and they never speak? Because that's not what I'm.
No, that's not what I'm talking about.
I mean the person who's
they're
just
being
not
intentional.
Yeah, they're just not
listen.
Johnny on the spot to be first, but they're going to kind of let the room breathe and let the room express itself, and maybe wait toward the tail end. That's what I mean by quiet. Or they have just
good EQ. They just know.
Yeah,
now is not the time to bring up my opinion on this.
Yeah, right.
And it's worth. Those are the times for me it's worth. Maybe they didn't speak up, but man, body language and facial expressions will tell you everything you need to know if you're intuitive. You just need to, like you said, when you're listening, it's not just listening to words. It is watching the room, and when somebody's got something to say and they're not saying it, there's a reason. Like I always have said, when your troops get quiet, there is a big problem. Yeah. When they don't want to speak, that is the time you need to pursue it. Yeah. And figure out what is going on, because something is happening under the scenes. But
why seating arrangement is so important for me. Anytime you guys set something up, I'm like, okay, if I can't see
you want to be able to see
I'm...
everybody's face, not sitting next to them where you can't quite see them. But the second thing that I've seen that's the destructive side of quiet is when people are not confident. Let's go to the other side of the coin. They're not confident, and you see them swaying to whichever opinion is the strongest. That's where I've had to do coaching before. They'll just sway to whoever's putting pressure on them. And sometimes they may feel completely different, but they feel if I don't go to this person and follow this person's guidance, I'm going to be screwed. So I'm just going to say, yeah, this was no good, and this upset me. And it didn't upset them, but they have to feel like they have to play the part to appease whomever they're talking with. That's where I've seen quiet destructive, because they don't have the confidence to go, I hear what you said, but my feelings are X. You don't have to say I disagree.
Right.
You just say I heard this, but what I see is blah, 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 blah.
Well, that's where politics trumps what's right.
That's right. So that's the only time I've seen where confidence does matter. And it, as you grow, when you talk about being inconsistent, if people see you sway, especially if you're in a leadership role and they see you sway to the pressure, you're going to lose the trust of your troops, because they're going to think you're just going to move when any kind of pressure is applied. And that's when we talk about eagles got to soar alone at some time. You have to be the one that's willing to go, no, this is right. This is what I believe. I know we may disagree, but I'm being respectful. That comes with time, I believe, and experience. And typically it really helps to have a leader above you that allows that expression, so you develop the confidence. And that's where we as leaders play a part in all of this.
Yeah, my final suggestion would be prepare to have to fly alone. Prepare to have to be the one that steps out, and prepare to be the person that nobody else will step out and join you. But I will just say from my experience, more often than not, it's a little bit like that question that gets asked in a classroom and nobody else had the courage to ask the question, but there's that one kid, like me, that just didn't care or wasn't really thinking about the perception, but was more curious to know the answer, to raise their hand, ask the question. And the teacher always says, no stupid questions. And you know that there's countless people in that room who also have that question. They just aren't willing to raise their hand. And I have found more often than not in my own life, my ability to ask that question, my courage to step out. There were other people who were thinking the same thing. There were other people who believed the same thing. There were other people who were driven by the beliefs and the convictions that I was. They just, for whatever reason, they needed somebody else to lead the parade.
Yeah, and it's, of course, I love animals, and I think about this. It's in our leadership and our mentorship to develop our people, to develop them to have the confidence they need. It takes us. It is part of our role to do that. And I think about raising, we've got a 2-year-old lab, 2.5 now. And you think about as a puppy, how scared they are of everything. They don't become more confident by disciplining them when they don't do something. Correct? You've talked about you can potty train a dog in 3 days without a rolled up newspaper, without hot sauce, without wiping their nose in it. You can train them through positive reinforcement and confidence. I think that's the same thing here. When you talk about, when I work with our dog, his name is Fred, that's 2.5, you see them get in their belly when they're scared. They spread out. They're just not, they see something new. They don't, and you just keep encouraging them and they take the step. But what happens as they get older and you tell them, come on, buddy, you can do it. You can do it. They're much more apt quickly to go, okay, she thinks I can do it. I can do it, and you see that trust and that confidence. And that's relative to a dog. I'm not saying people are like that, but it is relevant to the point that positive reinforcement is going to produce much more impactful results than negative. So be the eagle, soar alone when you need to, and your troops will follow. A mama duck in the water, she's got all those ducklings and they will follow her up a brick wall and keep trying and trying and trying because they trust her. And that's what counts.
Thanks for watching and listening to Grow Great, a city government leadership podcast. For Lisa Norris, I'm Randy Cantrell. Be well, do good, grow great. The website is growgreat.com.